When I walked into my birthday party with a black eye, the reaction was instant. Silence descended like a curtain falling on a stage. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips. I felt the weight of every gaze locked on my face, on the purple swelling around my left eye, on the bruise that no amount of makeup could conceal. Then my son Mark stepped forward. His voice rang out clear and proud. It was my wife who put her in her place, so she would learn to respect us. Caroline, my daughter-in-law, straightened her shoulders beside him. A small, venomous smile played across her lips. She looked at me as if I were garbage, as if I were nothing. Then my brother Ernest approached Mark, and what he said next changed everything. That day I lost my son, but I also found myself. Let me tell you how I reached that moment of public humiliation, how I transformed from a beloved mother into the enemy in my own home. Because this nightmare didn't start with a punch. It started much earlier, with soft words and fake smiles, with poison disguised as concern. 3 years ago, when my husband died, the world lost its color. Frank, my partner of 42 years, passed away silently one winter morning. A massive heart attack. I didn't even have time to say goodbye. One moment he was warm beside me beneath the sheets, and the next he was cold, gone, absent forever. The pain was so intense, I thought I would drown in it. I cried in the shower, so Mark wouldn't hear me. I cried while I cooked. I cried looking at the empty side of the bed. But I had to be strong. Mark needed me. He had lost his father, too. The house where we lived was our fortress, a beautiful property that Frank had purchased when Mark was just a boy. 2 floors, a large garden, big windows that welcomed the morning sun. Frank had left in my name in his will. "It's yours, Monica," he had told me months before he died, as if possessed by some premonition. "Don't let anyone take away what we built together." We signed the papers. Everything was in order. I was the legal owner of that house, of those memories, of every corner where I had raised my son. Mark lived with me after his father's death. He decided to stay. "I'm not going to leave you alone, Mom," he'd say while we had coffee in the mornings. He worked at a construction company, left early, returned tired, but always with a smile for me. We had dinner together. We watched movies on Sundays. We talked about Frank, about the memories, about how much we missed him. The pain was more bearable when shared. I cooked his favorite dishes. He fixed things that broke around the house. We were a team. We were family. I thought it would always be this way. Then Caroline entered our lives. He met her at a work conference. She was an event coordinator, elegant, self-assured, with that kind of polished beauty that seems to step out of a magazine. Dark hair, always perfectly styled, impeccable nails, expensive clothes. The first time he brought her home, she smiled at me with pearly white teeth and gave me a hug that felt calculated, measured to the millimeter. "Mrs. Monica, Mark talks so much about you," she said in a sweet voice. "It's a pleasure to meet the woman who raised such a wonderful man." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she was genuine. I prepared a special dinner that night. Roast chicken with the spices Mark loved, fresh salad, homemade bread still warm from the oven. Caroline ate little, pushing the food around on her plate while making comments about carbs and calories. "I hardly eat any starches," she said, looking at the bread with something close to contempt. "You have to take care of yourself, right?" She smiled at me, but there was something sharp in that smile, something that made me uncomfortable. Over the next few months, Caroline became part of our lives. She came to dinner 2 or 3 times a week, always polite, always smiling. But I started to notice little things. The way she looked at the house as if evaluating it, the comments that seemed innocent but had hidden barbs. "This living room is so classic," she'd say, touching the furniture Frank and I had chosen together. "I bet it's 30 years old, right? There are such modern styles now." Or when she saw the family photos on the wall, "How nice that you keep so many memories of the past, Monica. Though sometimes clinging so tightly to yesterday doesn't leave room for tomorrow." Mark noticed nothing. He was in love, blind. When I tried to mention something, he would offend her with a condescending smile. "Mom, Caroline just wants to help. She's used to organizing spaces. It's her job." And I would keep quiet. I didn't want to be that mother-in-law, that bitter woman who doesn't accept her son's partner. So I swallowed my doubts and smiled. They got married 6 months later, a small but elegant wedding. Caroline organized everything. I barely participated. "Don't worry, Mrs. Monica," she would tell me. "I'll take care of it. You just relax and enjoy." On the wedding day, as I watched them exchange vows, I felt a knot in my stomach. I missed Frank. He would have known what to say. He would have seen what I was beginning to see. After the honeymoon, Caroline moved into the house. "It's temporary, Mom," Mark explained, "just until we find our own place." I agreed. He was my son. I wasn't going to deny him a roof over his head. But temporary became 1 month, then 2, then 6. And with each passing day, Caroline took up more space. She reorganized the kitchen. She changed the dining room curtains. She moved the living room furniture. "We just need to feel at home, Monica," she would tell me with that soft smile. And I let her do it because I didn't want problems. But then the party started. Caroline invited friends, colleagues, people I didn't know. They would fill the living room, laugh loudly, drink late into the night. And when I appeared, the atmosphere would change. The conversations would stop. They looked at me as if I were an intruder in my own house. "Mom, don't you want to rest?" Mark would say gently, "We'll take care of things here." And I would retreat to my room, feeling displaced, invisible, redundant. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Have you watched someone slowly take over your space while you stood powerless to stop it? Tell me in the comments if you've experienced something like this, because I was living a silent nightmare, and I didn't even know it. The months passed, and the house was no longer mine. Not legally, not on paper, but in every detail that mattered. Caroline redecorated without asking permission. One day I came home and the cream-colored curtains that Frank had chosen were gone. In their place hung gray minimalist fabrics that made the living room feel cold and impersonal. "The other ones were just so outdated, Monica," Caroline explained as she folded the old curtains into a box. "These are more elegant, more current. You'll see, you'll get used to them." But I didn't get used to them. I wanted my curtains. I wanted my house. I wanted someone to ask me before changing the things Frank and I had built together. Mark worked more and more hours. He left before dawn and came back after 9 at night. We ate dinner, separately, me in the kitchen, them in the dining room with the door closed. I could hear their laughter, their private conversations, but I was no longer part of it. I was no longer part of my son's life. When I tried to talk to him, he was always tired, distracted, looking at his phone. "We'll talk later, Mom," he'd say without looking up. "I have to check some emails right now." And I was left with the words stuck in my throat. Caroline started making more direct comments. She no longer bothered to disguise her barbs with sweetness. One afternoon, while I was cooking, she came into the kitchen and wrinkled her nose. "Monica, do you always cook with so much grease? The smell just seeps in the whole house." She left the scented candle on the counter. "Use this afterwards, please. My friends are coming over tomorrow, and I don't want it to smell like old food." Old food? That's what she called the stew I was making. The same recipe Mark had loved his entire life. I started to cook less, to shut myself in my room more. The house felt hostile. Every space had Caroline's mark on it. Her magazines on the coffee table. Her shoes by the entrance. Her expensive perfume floating in the air. I was becoming invisible, a ghost in my own home. And the worst part was that Mark didn't see it, or didn't want to see it. One night, I went downstairs for some water. It was past 11. I thought everyone was asleep, but I heard voices in the study. The door was slightly ajar. I approached without making a sound. Caroline was talking to Mark, her voice low but intense. "We can't go on like this, honey. This house is too big for 3 people. And your mother, she's getting older. Wouldn't it be better if she lived in a smaller place, more manageable for her? There are very nice retirement homes with people her age. She'd have company. She'd be happy." My heart stopped. Mark was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then he sighed. "I don't know, Caroline. She's my mother. I can't just kick her out." Caroline let out a soft laugh. It's not about kicking her out, my love. It's about all of us having our own space. Think about it. We could have this house for ourselves. Start our family. Don't you want that? I moved away before I heard Mark's answer. I went up the stairs on trembling legs. I locked myself in my room and cried silently, my face buried in the pillow, so they wouldn't hear me. They wanted to get rid of me. They wanted my house, the house Frank had left me, the house where I had raised my son. And Mark was considering it. My own son was thinking about getting rid of me as if I were an old piece of furniture that no longer fit the new decor. The following days were tense. I couldn't look at Caroline without feeling sick. She knew it. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she smiled at me with that calm superiority. She knew I had heard, and she didn't care. In fact, she seemed to enjoy it. She started to become more territorial. Monica, could you knock before entering the living room? Sometimes we're having private conversations. Oh, Monica, it's better if you don't use the washing machine after 7. The noise bothers us when we're watching TV. The house had rules now. Rules I had made, rules that made me an unwelcome guest. I tried to talk to Mark one morning. I caught him before he left for work. Son, I need to talk to you. He was checking his briefcase. Rushed as always. What's wrong, Mom? I took a deep breath. I feel like Caroline and we're not doing well. I feel like I'm not welcome here anymore. Mark frowned. Mom, don't say that. This is your house. But he said it automatically without conviction, like someone repeating a learned phrase. Then why do I feel like I have to ask permission for everything? Why do I feel like I'm in the way? Mark ran a hand through his hair, uncomfortable. It's just that Caroline is used to having her space. It's nothing personal. Just try to be more flexible. Okay? For me, please. And he left. He left me standing there with the words of defense that never came. That night, Caroline hosted another dinner party. 6 people arrived. They took over the dining room, loud and cheerful. I was in the kitchen making myself a cup of tea when one of Caroline's friends walked in. She looked at me, surprised. Oh, hello. I didn't know someone else was here. Before I could answer, Caroline appeared behind her. Ah, that's Monica, Mark's mother. She lives here. The way she said it, she lives here, as if I were a freeloader, as if it wasn't my house. The friend nodded politely, and they left. I heard their laughter from the dining room. I stood there in my own kitchen, feeling small, humiliated, invisible. The weeks went by. Caroline started talking about renovations. This kitchen is so old, she'd tell Mark while I was standing right there, as if I couldn't hear her. We should modernize it. Change the cabinets. Put an island in the center. Have you seen how much a property's value increases with a renovated kitchen? We could invest about $20,000 and get double that back if we ever sell. Sell? She said we sell as if the house were hers, as if I didn't exist. Then came my birthday. 70 years old. Mark suggested having a party. You deserve to celebrate, Mom, he told me with a smile that reminded me of the boy he once was. For a moment, I felt hope. Maybe things could get better. Maybe I still mattered. Caroline took care of everything. She invited family, friends, neighbors. She decorated the living room with silver balloons and garlands. She prepared a table with elegant appetizers. On the outside, everything looked perfect, but I felt a strange tension in the air. Something wasn't right. The morning of my birthday, I went downstairs for breakfast. Caroline was in the kitchen talking on the phone. When she saw me, she ended the call abruptly. Good morning, Monica. Her tone was cold. I poured myself coffee in silence. She just stood there, watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Do you know what day it is? I asked, trying to break the ice. Yes, your birthday. Silence. And also the day you should be making some important decisions about your future. My hand stopped with the cup halfway in my mouth. What do you mean? Caroline crossed her arms. Mark and I have been talking. We need this house, Monica. We want to start a family. We need space, privacy. And you need a place more suitable for your age. I felt the floor move beneath my feet. This is my house, Caroline. She smiled that small, venomous smile. For now, I didn't know what to say. I went to my room, my heart racing. I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. What was happening? How had I gotten to this point? I looked at the photos on my nightstand. Frank and me on our wedding day. Mark as a baby. Our happy family. And now everything was falling apart. That afternoon, I got ready for my own party, feeling a huge weight on my chest. I put on the ivory dress I had bought especially for the occasion. I carefully applied my makeup, trying to hide the dark circles, the marks of insomnia and distress. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw a tired woman, a woman who was losing the battle in her own home. I took a deep breath. I had to go down. The guests would be arriving soon. I couldn't hide in my room on my birthday. I went down the stairs slowly. The living room was transformed. Caroline had done a flawless job. Everything looked elegant, sophisticated, perfect. But it didn't feel like my party. It felt like someone else's event. The first guests started to arrive. My brother, Ernest, was one of the first. He hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "Are you okay? You look pale." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a little tired." He looked at me with concern, but didn't press. More people arrived. Cousins, old friends, neighbors. Everyone congratulated me, hugged me, wished me the best. For a moment, surrounded by people who loved me, I almost forgot the tension I was living in. Caroline moved among the guests like the perfect hostess. Smiling, charming, attentive. Mark was by her side, proud of his wife. I watched them from a distance, feeling like I was watching someone else's life. My own party, and I was a spectator. Caroline approached me at one point with 2 glasses of wine in her hands. She offered me one. "Happy birthday, Monica," she said with that smile that no longer fooled me. I took the glass out of politeness. "Thank you for organizing all this." She tilted her head. "It's the least I could do. After all, soon this house will be completely ours, and we want to start off on the right foot." She said it in a low voice, just for me, while the others chatted around us. It was a threat disguised as courtesy. I needed air. I excused myself and went up to the second floor. I went into the bathroom and closed the door. I leaned against the sink, breathing heavily. I had to calm down. I couldn't ruin my own party with a panic attack. I splashed cold water on my wrists. I took deep breaths, 1, 2, 3 times. When I felt more stable, I left the bathroom. And then I saw her. Caroline was in the hallway in front of my bedroom door. She had my jewelry box in her hands. My jewelry box, the small wooden chest where I kept a few pieces of jewelry Frank had given me over the years. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. Caroline turned without a hint of guilt on her face. "Just looking. This jewelry is very old, isn't it? I bet it's worth something." I walked towards her and snatched the jewelry box from her hands. "You have no right to touch my things." She laughed, a soft, dismissive laugh. "Calm down, Monica. I wasn't going to steal them, although, with what they're worth, they could help pay for part of the kitchen renovation." I felt rage rising in my throat like lava. "Get out of my room." Caroline took a step towards me. We were inches apart. "This isn't your room. This is our house. And the sooner you understand that, the better for everyone." Something inside me broke. All the accumulated humiliation, all the forced silence, all the invisibility I had endured for months suddenly exploded. "This house is mine. It's in my name. Frank left it to me, and you have no right." The words came out with more force than I expected. Caroline's eyes narrowed. Her face changed. The mask of politeness fell away, and I saw something ugly, something cruel underneath. "You're a ridiculous old woman clinging to the past. Mark doesn't need you anymore. I'm his family now, and we will get this house, with or without your permission." I should have stayed quiet. I should have gone downstairs and forgotten about it. But I couldn't. "Get out of my room right now, or I'm calling Mark." Caroline let out a laugh. "Call Mark. Go ahead. He always believes me. Always." And she was right. We both knew it. But I couldn't back down now. "Out." I pointed to the door. Caroline looked at me with pure hatred. Then, without warning, She pushed me. It wasn't a hard push, but I wasn't expecting it. I lost my balance. My hip hit the edge of the dresser. I tried to grab onto something, but my hand slipped. I fell sideways. My head hit the corner of the nightstand. The pain was instant, sharp, blinding. I brought my hand to my eye and felt wetness, blood. Caroline just stood there, looking down at me on the floor. For a second, I saw something like fear in her eyes, but she composed herself quickly. "You tripped on your own," she said in a firm voice. "You're old and clumsy. You fell." She looked at me for a few more seconds, then left the room, closing the door behind her. I stayed there on the floor, touching my eye, which was beginning to swell. The physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation, the helplessness, the horror of what had just happened. I don't know how long I was there. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. I finally got up. I looked in the mirror. The skin around my eye was already turning purple. There was a small cut on my eyebrow. The blood had left a thin line down my cheek. I cleaned it with a towel. I tried to cover it with makeup, but it was useless. The bruise was too obvious. Downstairs, I could hear music, laughter, conversations. My party was going on as if nothing had happened. And I was up here, bleeding, beaten, broken. I thought about not going down, about staying locked up, about waiting for everyone to leave. But then I heard Mark's voice calling me. "Mom, come on. We're going to cut the cake." I couldn't hide. It was my birthday. I had to face what had happened, so I went down slowly. Every step was an effort. When I reached the last step, the conversation stopped. One by one, the guests turned to me. I saw their faces change, surprise, horror, confusion. The silence felt like a tombstone. Mark was the first to speak, but not with concern, not with alarm. He stepped forward and said in a clear, almost proud voice, "It was my wife who put her in her place, so she would learn to respect us." The words fell like bombs in the middle of the silence. Caroline straightened her shoulders beside him, satisfied. She looked at me with those cold eyes, victorious. The guests were motionless. No one knew what to say. No one knew what to do. And I just stood there in front of everyone, humiliated in the most horrible way I could imagine. My own son justifying violence against me. My own son choosing her over me. Then Ernest pushed his way through the crowd. His face was red with fury. He walked straight up to Mark and looked at him with an intensity one had never seen before. What kind of man lets his wife assault his mother and then celebrates it in front of everyone? His voice was low, but loaded with contempt. Mark turned pale. "Uncle, it's not what it looks like." Ernest cut him off. "Your father will be ashamed of you." The silence that followed was devastating. Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Caroline tried to take his arm, but Ernest shot her a death glare. "And you? You came into this family with lies. We all see it." Some guests started to murmur. Others looked at the floor, uncomfortable. A cousin came up to me. "Monica, are you okay? Do we need to call someone?" I shook my head. Tears were starting to cloud my vision, but I wasn't going to cry. Not there, not in front of them. Ernest took my arm gently. "Let's go upstairs. I'll clean that wound." But before I could move, Caroline spoke. Her voice was shrill, desperate. She provoked me. She insulted me. I was just defending myself. Ernest turned to her. "Liar." The word hung in the air. Mark finally reacted. He stepped between Ernest and Caroline, protecting her as if she were the victim. "Uncle, that's enough. You don't know what happened." Ernest let out a bitter laugh. "I don't? I look at your mother with a black eye, and you defending the person who hit her. I know exactly what happened here." More guests started to leave. Some said goodbye awkwardly. Others just left without a word. The party was falling apart. My birthday had turned into a public nightmare. An elderly woman, a friend of my late husband, approached before she left. She took my hand and whispered, "Frank never would have allowed this. Take care of yourself, Monica." And she left, leaving me with those words stabbed in my heart. Ernest took me to the kitchen. He closed the door. He sat me in a chair and began to check my eye carefully. "This needs ice," he said as he opened the freezer. He wrapped ice cubes in a clean cloth and pressed it gently against my face. The cold made me flinch, but the pain began to subside a little. How did it happen? Ernest asked, his voice controlled, though I could see the contained fury in his eyes. I told him everything, the jewelry box, the argument, the push, the fall. As I spoke, I saw his jaw tighten more and more. "This can't go on," he said when I finished. "This house is yours. Legally yours. She has no right." I wiped away the tears that had started to fall without permission. "But Mark," he's on her side. He didn't even ask if I was okay. He just offended her. Ernest clenched his fists. "Mark is blinded, but he's going to wake up. And when he does, he's going to regret this." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that my son would go back to being the man I had raised. But something inside me had broken that night. Something that might never be repaired. The kitchen door burst open. Mark came in with Caroline hot on his heels. "Mom, we need to talk," he said in a serious tone. Ernest stood up, getting in between us. "Don't you go near her." Mark looked at him with frustration. "She's my mother. I have a right to talk to her." Ernest didn't move. "You lost that right when you let your wife hit her and humiliated her in front of everyone." Caroline intervened, her voice sharp and defensive. "It was an accident. She tripped. I didn't touch her." I looked at her. There she was, lying through her teeth without a shred of remorse on her face. "You pushed me," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You pushed me and I fell, and then you left me on the floor like I was trash." Caroline shook her head, fake tears starting to form in her eyes. "Mark, she's lying. She's trying to tear us apart. She's jealous of what we have." It was incredible. She was turning the tables, playing the victim. And Mark looked at her with concern, as if he truly believed she was the one who needed protection. "Monica has always been difficult," Caroline continued, her voice breaking. "From the day she met me, she's treated me poorly. She's made me feel like I don't belong here. I just want peace. I want us to be a family." Every word was a stab. She was building a narrative where I was the villain, and she was the innocent victim, and Mark was buying all of it. "Mom," he said, turning to me, maybe you need a rest. You're stressed. Confused. Confused. He was calling me confused, as if I were crazy, as if I had made it all up. Ernest exploded. "Are you listening to yourself, Mark? Your mother has a black eye, and you're trying to convince her she's confused." Mark ran his hands through his hair, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to believe. I wasn't there. I didn't see what happened." Caroline clung to his arm, sobbing against his shoulder. "She hates me, Mark. She's never accepted me. Now she's making things up, so you'll kick me out of the house." It was a masterful performance, and it was working. I stood up from the chair. The ice pack fell to the floor. I looked my son directly in the eyes. "Mark, I am your mother. I raised you. I gave you everything I had. I loved you unconditionally. And now you're calling me a liar to protect a woman who hit me." My voice broke on the last word. Mark looked away. He couldn't meet my gaze. And in that moment, I knew I had lost him. Maybe not forever, but right then, Caroline had won. "I want you to leave," I said with all the dignity I could muster. "This is my house. I want you to pack your things and go." Caroline stopped crying instantly. Her face hardened. "This house is too big for you alone. You need help. You need supervision." The word supervision sounded like poison. Ernest took a step forward. "The only one who needs to leave is you. Monica is the legal owner of this property. You can leave voluntarily, or we can call the police and have you removed by force." Mark finally spoke, and his words shattered me. "We're not leaving. This house should be mine. My father built it for our family. For me, it's not fair that Mom has everything when I need to start my own family." There it was, the truth. He didn't care about my well-being. He didn't care that I had been hit. He cared about the house, the property, the money. Caroline had put that idea in his head, and now he was repeating it as if it were his own. "Your father left this house to me because he trusted me to take care of it," I said, my voice shaking. Because he knew it was my sanctuary, my security. And you want to take it from me. Mark didn't answer. Caroline did. You need to be realistic, Monica. You're old. How many more years are you going to live here? 10? Maybe 15 if you're lucky. We're young. We need the space now. We can take care of you somewhere else, a more appropriate place. Every word was calculated, cold, merciless. Ernest took out his phone. I'm calling the police right now. Mark turned pale. Uncle, don't do this. I'm your nephew. Ernest looked at him with deep disappointment. And she is my sister, and you are destroying her for a woman who only wants your money. Caroline laughed. My money? Mark doesn't have any money. Everything is in her name. She pointed at me with contempt. That's why we're here. That's why we need her to understand she's not alone in this anymore. The kitchen door opened again. It was David, the family lawyer. He had been a close friend of my husband and had drafted his will. Apparently, someone had called him during the chaos of the party. He walked in with his briefcase in hand, looking at the scene seriously. Good evening. I heard there was some trouble here. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere. Caroline tensed up. Mark looked confused. Ernest sighed in relief. David, thank goodness you're here, Ernest said. We need to clear up a few things about the ownership of this house. The lawyer nodded. He opened his briefcase and took out a folder. I brought the documents. I thought we might need them. He looked at Mark and Caroline. I believe there's some confusion about the legal status of this property. Caroline straightened her back, tried to regain her composure. There's no confusion. We all know the house is in Monica's name, but Mark is her son, her only heir. It will be his eventually. David looked at her with neutral expression, but his eyes were sharp. That's not exactly correct. He opened the folder and took out several documents. Your late husband's will have certain specific clauses. My heart started beating faster. Clauses? Frank never mentioned anything like that. The lawyer continued. The house was left to Monica in absolute ownership, but there is a protection clause. Mark frowned. What does that mean? David glanced at me briefly, as if asking for permission. I nodded. I needed to know. Everyone needed to know. It means that if Monica is pressured, coerced, or forced to leave the property by any family member, the house does not pass to direct heirs. Instead, it will be donated entirely to a charitable institution specified in the will. The silence that followed was absolute. Caroline turned pale. Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The lawyer's words hung in the air like a sentence. Caroline was the first to react. That's ridiculous. That can't be legal. David looked at her with professional calm. It is completely legal. Your husband made his intentions very clear. He wanted to protect his wife from any kind of family pressure after his death. He took another document from the folder. Here is the exact clause. If Monica is forced to sell, donate, or abandon the property under duress of any kind, the house automatically passes to the St. Gabriel Senior Foundation. Mark would inherit absolutely nothing. Mark slumped into a chair. His face had lost all its color. Dad did that? It wasn't a question. It was a statement filled with shock. David nodded. Your father was a wise man. He had seen many cases of families destroyed by inheritances. He wanted to make sure Monica had a safe place for the rest of her days, without pressure, without manipulation. He looked directly at Caroline when he said the last word. She clenched her fists, her mask of sweetness now completely shattered. Only naked rage remained on her face. So all this time, Ernest said, looking at Caroline with contempt, this whole plan to get my sister out of her house, all the humiliation, the disrespect, the push today, it was all for nothing, because you were never going to get this house. Caroline took a step back as if she'd been slapped. I didn't have a plan. But her voice sounded hollow. We all knew the truth now. Everything was clear. The renovation she wanted to do, the comments about the property's value, the conversations I had overheard about nursing homes. It had all been a calculated strategy to push me out of my own house. Mark slowly got up. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in months. I saw confusion in his eyes. I saw shame starting to appear. Mom, I didn't know. His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know about that clause. I looked at him, feeling a deep pain in my chest. But you knew they were making me feel bad. You knew I felt displaced in my own home, and you did nothing. You chose to believe her instead of me. Mark opened his mouth to reply, but the words wouldn't come. What could he say? It was true. It was all true. Caroline changed tactics, her eyes filled with tears again. Mark, honey, you have to believe me. I didn't know anything about this. I just wanted us to have our own space. I wanted us to be happy. She clung to his arm desperately. Don't leave me. Please. We're in this together. But Mark pulled away from her grasp. Something had changed in his expression. The fog was beginning to lift. How long have you been planning this? He asked, his voice dangerously low. Caroline shook her head. I didn't plan anything. You're misinterpreting everything. David intervened again. There's something else you should know. He took out another document. 3 weeks ago, someone requested a professional appraisal of this property. The appraiser contacted my office because he noticed the name on the request didn't match the registered owner. He looked at Caroline. The request was made by Caroline Mendez. She paid $500 for a full appraisal of the house, including future value projections if certain renovations were made. The silence was deafening. Mark looked at his wife as if she were a stranger. Also, David continued, we received an inquiry 2 weeks ago asking about the legal process for declaring an elderly person incompetent to manage their own assets. My heart stopped. Incompetent? Had they tried to declare me incompetent? The inquiry came from the same phone, number registered to Caroline Mendez. David closed the folder. We didn't proceed with any information, of course, but it was logged. Caroline backed up against the wall. That's a lie. You're all making this up to turn him against me. Mark turned to her, fury blazing in his eyes. You tried to declare my mother incompetent? You tried to take her house using the law? Caroline was sobbing now, but they were tears of panic, not sadness. I was just researching options. I wasn't going to do anything. I just wanted to know what was possible. Mark ran his hands over his face. My God, what have I done? What did you turn me into? He looked at her with horror, as if he could finally see what we had all seen from the beginning. Ernest put a hand on my shoulder. Monica, do you want them to leave tonight? I looked at Mark, my son, the boy I had raised, the man he had become whom I no longer recognized. Part of me wanted to scream at him, wanted to throw him out of the house immediately. But another part, the part that had been a mother for so long, still felt love for him, a wounded, broken love, but love nonetheless. Mark can stay tonight, I said in a tired voice. But she leaves now. Caroline's eyes widened in shock. You can't do this. I'm his wife. I looked her straight in the eye. This is my house, and I want you out of it. Mark didn't defend her this time. He stood in silence, staring at the floor. Caroline looked at him, waiting for him to say something, to protect her as he always had. But he didn't move. Reality had finally hit him. David spoke in a professional tone. Mrs. Mendez, I suggest you pack your personal belongings and leave. If you refuse, I can call the authorities. Caroline looked at all of us with pure hatred. There were no more tears, just rage. This isn't over, she said in a venomous voice. I have rights. I'm Mark's wife. This house will be mine eventually, too. Ernest took a step toward her. You didn't hear a word the lawyer said, did you? This house will never be yours. Ever. And if you keep pushing, if you keep trying to get Monica out, the house goes to charity. Neither you nor Mark will see a dime. Caroline gritted her teeth. She looked at Mark one last time. Are you going to let them throw me out like this? Are you going to choose her over me? Mark looked up. His eyes were red. I think you already made your choice a long time ago. You chose this house over me, over us. His voice sounded broken. Caroline let out a bitter laugh. You're an idiot, a weak mama's boy who's never going to grow up. She grabbed her purse that she had left in the kitchen and stormed out, slamming the door. The sound echoed through the house.